Hello and welcome to today's special lesson on a concept that could completely transform how you lead your team and drive results as a new manager. Did you know that 94% of the decisions your team members make aren't based on careful analysis, but on subtle environmental cues that you might be completely unaware of? That's right. The success of your team might have less to do with their abilities and more to do with how you're structuring their choices without even realizing it. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of choice architecture, a concept from the groundbreaking book Nudge by Nobel Prize winner Richard Thaler and legal scholar Cass Sunstein that has revolutionized how the smartest leaders approach decision making. By the end of this lesson, you'll understand how to ethically design your team's environment to naturally guide them toward better decisions without restricting their freedom or resorting to heavy-handed mandates. Introduction: the hidden force behind every decision. Imagine this scenario. You've just been promoted to manager and you're leading your first team meeting. You've prepared an important decision that needs team input. Perhaps it's about prioritizing projects, allocating resources, or implementing a new process. You present the options and ask for feedback, but the responses you get are disappointing. People seem to default to the safest option, not the best one. Or perhaps they're overwhelmed by choices and can't make a decision at all. Or maybe they're all just agreeing with whatever was mentioned first. What's happening here? You've just encountered the invisible power of choice architecture. Choice architecture is the careful design of the environments in which people make decisions. As Thaler and Sunstein explain in Nudge, we are all choice architects whether we realize it or not. Every time you present options to your team, organize information in an email, design a form, or even arrange items in a meeting agenda, you're creating a choice architecture that powerfully influences the decisions people make. The key insight is this: there is no such thing as a neutral design. Every way of presenting choices has some influence on the decision maker. The question isn't whether you'll influence your team's decisions. You absolutely will. The question is how you'll use that influence. The science: why humans need nudges. To understand why choice architecture matters so much, we need to understand a fundamental truth about human decision making that traditional management training often ignores. In Nudge, Thaler and Sunstein distinguish between two types of thinkers. Econs. These are the perfectly rational decision makers that exist only in economic textbooks. They analyze all available information, weigh costs and benefits perfectly, and always make the optimal choice. Humans. These are real people, including you and your team members. Humans use mental shortcuts, are influenced by emotions, procrastinate important decisions, and are heavily influenced by how choices are presented. Traditional management approaches often assume we're dealing with econs. Just provide good information and incentives, and people will make good decisions. But the reality is we're managing humans who need well-designed environments to make their best decisions. Let me share a powerful example from Nudge that illustrates this principle. In school cafeterias, simply rearranging food so that healthier options are at eye level and easier to reach can increase healthy food consumption by up to 25% without removing any choices or changing prices. The freedom to choose remains intact, but the architecture guides people toward better decisions. As a manager, you're essentially running the cafeteria of your team's decision-making environment. How you arrange the food matters tremendously. The 4 elements of effective choice architecture. Based on the principles in Nudge, there are 4 key elements of choice architecture that you can immediately apply as a new manager. Defaults matter most. The most powerful tool in your choice architecture toolkit is the default option. What happens if people do nothing? Research consistently shows that defaults are incredibly sticky. Most people will go with whatever is presented as the standard option. As a manager, you're setting defaults all the time, whether you realize it or not. When you create a meeting agenda, the first item becomes the default focus. When you create a project template, those initial settings become the default approach. When you establish team norms, those become the default behaviors. Smart managers audit their defaults regularly. Ask yourself, if my team members did nothing but accept the defaults I've established, would they be making good decisions? If not, it's time to change your defaults. For example, instead of making reply all the default for email responses, make reply to sender the default with reply all requiring an extra step. This simple change can dramatically reduce email overload. Expect error. Humans make mistakes. It's inevitable. Good choice architecture anticipates these errors and design systems to minimize their impact. For instance, when creating a critical process for your team, ask, what happens if someone makes a mistake here? Then design safeguards. This might mean creating checklists, building in review steps, or using digital tools with confirmation prompts for irreversible actions. One powerful technique from Nudge is to create required choice moments for important decisions. Instead of letting team members passively accept a default that might not be right for their situation, require them to actively choose from clearly presented options. Give feedback. People learn when they receive clear, immediate feedback on their decisions. Without feedback, even experienced professionals will continue making the same mistakes. As a manager, design feedback systems that help your team understand the consequences of their choices. This could be as simple as a weekly metrics review that shows how decisions impacted outcomes, or as sophisticated as a digital dashboard that provides real-time feedback. Remember that the best feedback is immediate or as close to the decision as possible, specific, tied directly to particular choices, actionable, suggests how to improve, structure complex choices. When decisions become complex with multiple factors to consider, most humans become overwhelmed and resort to simplistic decision-making strategies that often lead to poor outcomes. Help your team navigate complexity by breaking big decisions into smaller manageable components, creating comparison tools that align options on key dimensions, filtering out irrelevant options to reduce cognitive overload, providing decision-making frameworks that guide analysis. For example, if your team needs to evaluate vendors, don't just dump all the proposals on them. Create a structured comparison template that highlights the key factors in an easy-to-compare format. Real-world applications for new managers. Let's explore how you can apply these principles in common management scenarios. Meeting management. The way you structure meetings is a perfect example of choice architecture in action. Default agenda items. Begin with the most important strategic items rather than routine updates to ensure energy is focused on what matters most. Pre-meeting materials. Structure pre-reading with executive summaries and clear decision points to guide attention. Decision processes. Design explicit processes for how decisions will be made, consensus, consultation, or individual decision with input. One manager I worked with completely transformed her team's productivity by changing one simple default. Meetings were 25 minutes instead of 30 and 50 minutes instead of 60. This small change created natural breaks between meetings, reduced fatigue, and improved focus. Project planning. How you structure project planning processes dramatically influences outcomes. Templates and frameworks. Create project templates with smart defaults that incorporate best practices. Milestone structure. Break projects into smaller milestones with clear feedback points. Risk assessment. Build in structured moments to consider what might go wrong. A product manager at a tech company applied this by changing his team's project template to include a required pre-mortem section where team members had to explicitly list what might cause the project to fail. This simple addition reduced project failures by 30% by making risk consideration a default part of planning. Performance management. The way you structure feedback and evaluation creates powerful architecture for performance. Feedback timing, design regular check-ins rather than waiting for annual reviews. Evaluation criteria, clearly structure what dimensions of performance matter most. Recognition systems, create easy ways to recognize positive behaviors. One new manager implemented a simple Feedback Friday email where she highlighted one specific thing each team member did well that week. This tiny architectural change dramatically increased positive behaviors because people knew what was being noticed and valued. The ethics of choice architecture, freedom-preserving leadership. At this point, you might be wondering, isn't this all just manipulation? Am I tricking my team into doing what I want? This is where Thaler and Sunstein's concept of libertarian paternalism becomes important for ethical leadership. The key principle is this: good choice architecture guides people toward better decisions while preserving their freedom to choose differently. As a manager, this means transparency. Be open about how you're structuring choices and why. Easy opt-outs. Make it relatively easy for people to go against the default when it makes sense. Welfare-focused. Design architecture that helps people achieve their own goals, not just yours. The difference between manipulation and ethical nudging is whether you're helping people make decisions they would want to make if they had perfect information, unlimited cognitive capacity, and complete self-control. For example, automatically enrolling employees in retirement savings plans with the option to opt out helps them achieve their own long-term goals while preserving their freedom to choose differently. That's ethical choice architecture. Implementation, becoming a choice architect. So how do you put these ideas into practice? Here's a simple 3-step process. Step 1, audit your current architecture. Start by examining the current choice environments you've created. What are the default options in your team processes? How do you present choices to your team? What feedback systems are in place? How do you structure complex decisions? Look for unintended consequences of your current design. Are people making predictable errors? Are they avoiding certain decisions altogether? Are they overwhelmed by complexity? Step 2, redesign with intention. Once you've identified problems, redesign your choice architecture with clear intentions. Set smart defaults that work for most situations. Create paths of least resistance toward good decisions. Built-in feedback mechanisms. Simplify complex choices. Remember that small changes can have big impacts. You don't need to overhaul everything at once. Step 3, test and refine. The best choice architects treat their designs as hypotheses to be tested. Implement changes and observe results. Gather feedback from your team. Measure outcomes against your goals. Refine your approach based on what you learn. Mini summary: the power of choice architecture. Let's recap what we've learned about choice architecture. As a manager, you are always influencing decisions through how you structure choices. There is no neutral design. Effective choice architecture works with human psychology rather than against it, recognizing that we're dealing with humans, not econs. The 4 key elements of good choice architecture are smart defaults, error anticipation, clear feedback, and structured complexity. Ethical choice architecture preserves freedom while guiding people toward better decisions. Becoming an intentional choice architect involves auditing your current environment, redesigning with clear intentions, and continuously testing and refining your approach. The beauty of choice architecture is that it allows you to have outsized impact without resorting to mandates, incentives, or constant oversight. By designing environments that naturally guide people toward better decisions, you multiply your effectiveness as a leader. That's all for today's lesson.